Every morning before the day has even begun, millions of people do the same thing. They open their banking app. Not because anything changed overnight, but because they're hoping for good news while bracing for bad news at the very same time. If you've ever felt that knot in your stomach before looking at your balance, the real problem may not be the number on the screen. It may be the story your mind tells before you ever see it. Most of us have been taught that worrying about money is simply being responsible. But nearly 2,000 years ago, Jesus challenged that idea in a way most people completely overlook. He didn't give one piece of advice. He revealed 5 principles that, together, can change the way you carry financial fear. By the end of this video, you may discover the greatest source of money worry was never your bank account. It was the lens through which you've been looking at it. Let's begin with the first thing he said. Somewhere between paying today's bills and worrying about next month's, most people never notice the exact moment they stopped living in the present and started living in a future that hasn't happened yet. Here's a question worth sitting with for a second. If worry could actually protect you from what's coming, wouldn't the most anxious people on earth also be the most financially secure? They're not. Often it's the opposite. Nearly 2,000 years ago, someone addressed this directly. In a sentence most people have heard so many times they've stopped hearing it at all. Therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Most people read this as comfort. Something soft, something you'd cross-stitch onto a pillow. But this isn't comfort. It's a diagnosis. Think about the last night you couldn't sleep. You weren't paying a bill. You weren't fixing a problem. You were lying in bed solving tomorrow. So what was all that worry actually doing? Was it protecting your money? Not really, the balance stayed exactly the same. Was it preparing you for tomorrow? Not in any way you could measure. Before worry takes your money, before it steals your sleep, before it drains your peace, it almost always takes something else first. Your presence. Worry always asks you to leave today and move into a tomorrow that hasn't invited you yet. Pulls you out of the only moment where you actually have any power, this one, and drops you into an imagined one where you have none. Think about the banking app again. That knot in your stomach before opening it rarely comes from what's actually in the account. You're not looking at your balance. You're looking through something. What if the thing distorting the number on that screen was never the number at all? There's an old way of understanding this. Imagine a lens, not a window. A window shows you what's actually there. A lens shapes what you see before you ever see it. And a lens built from fear of what hasn't happened yet doesn't show your finances clearly. Shows a forecast and calls it fact. Have you noticed how quickly your mind spots what could go wrong, long before it notices what's already okay? That's not because you're weak. It's because the human mind has always learned to notice danger first. Nearly 2,000 years later, Florence Scovel Shinn described something remarkably similar. She believed fear doesn't simply react to lack, it rehearses it. In her words, imagination quietly prepares us for the reality we expect. Different language. Strikingly similar principle. Spend enough evenings expecting collapse, and eventually your mind stops asking if something will go wrong. It begins looking for evidence that it already is. You're not polishing that lens. You're tinting it, one worried evening at a time, until it only knows how to recognize collapse. So what does letting go of tomorrow actually look like, in a life that still has real bills and real responsibilities? Jesus wasn't condemning wisdom or responsibility. He was exposing the habit of living emotionally inside tomorrow before tomorrow had even arrived. Tonight, before opening that app one more time, there's a smaller question worth asking instead of the usual one. Not what might go wrong next month. Just, is there enough for tonight? Most of the time the honest answer is yes. Maybe that's why Jesus began here. Before provision, before the birds, before the kingdom, he first asked you to put tomorrow down. Because hands already gripping tomorrow cannot receive anything new today. But if tomorrow doesn't belong in your hands, whose hands does it belong in? There's a particular kind of tired that has nothing to do with hours slept. It's the tired of believing that if you stop thinking about the money for even one day, everything quietly falls apart. You felt it. The sense that you are the only one holding the structure up. That no one else is checking the numbers, planning 3 steps ahead, calculating what happens if this client doesn't pay on time. If you let go, even for an afternoon, who else would catch it? So you don't let go. Not really. Not even on vacation, not even in bed. Not even in the quiet minutes before falling asleep. Sits in the shoulders. In the tightness behind the chest that never fully releases, even on the good days. But here's a question worth asking honestly. If carrying it all alone actually worked, wouldn't you feel safer by now? After all these years of vigilance, shouldn't the fear have gotten smaller instead of louder? It hasn't. And that's strange, isn't it? Because if the exhaustion isn't buying you safety, what exactly is it buying? In the same breath as the teaching about tomorrow, Jesus said something that easily gets lost because it sounds almost too simple. Your heavenly Father knows that you need them, not will provide someday, not might if you pray hard enough. Both ready before you ask. Most people hear this as a nice thought for people who already feel secure. But think about who Jesus was actually speaking to. Many of the people listening to him lived with far less financial security than most of us know today. And to them he didn't say, work harder and hope. He said, you are known. There's a difference between believing you're forgotten and believing you're carrying something alone that was never meant to be carried alone. Picture the banking app again, that small ritual of opening it and bracing. What if part of what makes that moment so heavy isn't just the number, but the quiet belief underneath it, that no one is watching over this except you? That belief has a name, even if you've never said it out loud. Sounds something like, it's all on me. And once that belief settles in, it doesn't just sit in the shoulders. It darkens the lens. Because once you believe everything depends on you, every unpaid invoice looks larger. Every unexpected expense feels fatal. Not because the numbers changed, 'cause the lens did. Florence Scovel Shinn described this as living without a sense of divine support, the quiet belief that you're facing everything alone. Faith doesn't begin by changing your circumstances. It begins by changing the story you believe about who's carrying them with you. But what does that different story actually sound like? There's a small, honest exercise worth trying tonight. Before you check your banking app one last time, before you turn off the light, pause. Just for a moment. And say, quietly, even if part of you doubts it, I am not carrying this alone. Don't try to force anything. Just notice. Notice what happens in your chest. For some people, nothing shifts right away, and that's alright too. For others, something in the shoulders drops half an inch, the way it does when someone finally takes one weight from your hands, even if you're still holding others. That half an inch matters more than it seems. The lens isn't cleared all at once. It clears the way morning fog does, unevenly, one patch at a time, until eventually you notice you can see something you couldn't see the night before. Tomorrow you were asked to put down. Today you were asked to stop carrying everything alone. So why, immediately after that, did Jesus point to birds? What was he trying to make visible? That anxiety had been hiding all along. Worry changes more than the way you feel. Changes what you notice. It narrows your attention until the only things you can see are the things that are missing, and everything else, quietly, falls out of frame. Notice what your eyes actually land on during a hard week. The unpaid invoice. The declining balance. The question of whether what you have will be enough. Rarely the things that are, quietly, still working, still holding, still here. Here's a question worth asking plainly. When did you last notice something going right, and let yourself actually register it instead of moving straight to the next worry? Jesus, teaching people who had far less certainty than most of us carry today, didn't tell them to stop noticing what was missing. He told them to look somewhere specific. Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Picture it for a second. Not a metaphor yet, just the actual scene. A bird with no salary, no savings account, no 5-year plan. And somehow, every single morning fed. Most people hear this verse and think it's about trust. And it is. But before trust can grow, something else has to happen first. You have to learn how to see. Because the bird isn't new information. Birds have always been there, outside every window, every single day. What's new is being asked to actually look. This is the part almost nobody talks about. Anxiety doesn't just create fear. It creates a kind of tunnel vision, where the mind narrows so tightly around what's missing that it stops registering what's already quietly present. Think about your own week. The client who did pay on time without being asked twice. The unexpected refund. The friend who covered coffee without being asked. The job that, despite everything, is still there on Monday. None of that felt like evidence. It felt like nothing, because relief rarely announces itself the way fear does. Fear is loud. Provision is usually quiet. And a mind trained to scan for danger will always find the danger first, simply because it was looking for it. It rarely goes looking for the quiet proof sitting right beside it. This is where the lens shows itself again, in a slightly different light this time. Not darkened by fear of tomorrow. Not darkened by the belief that you're carrying everything alone, but narrowed like a camera focused so tightly on one corner of the frame that it misses everything else standing just outside it. The birds were never the point. The point was always what you've stopped letting yourself see. Florence Scovel Shinn often taught that what we continually give our attention to shapes the way we experience life. Focus only on lack, and eventually lack becomes the only thing you know how to recognize. Widen the focus even slightly toward what's already working, and something in the picture starts to shift. Not because attention alone pays a bill, but because a mind that has stopped seeing any evidence of provision starts to believe none exists. And a mind convinced nothing is working behaves very differently than one that can still point to something, however small, that is. Maybe the miracle of the birds was never that they had no problems. Maybe it was that they were a reminder of something worry had made you forget. So tonight, before opening that banking app one more time, try something different with it. Not bracing. Not scanning for what's wrong. Just one honest question, held for a few seconds before the screen even loads. What this week actually worked? It doesn't have to be large. It rarely is. A bill that was smaller than expected. A day that went better than you assumed it would. Let it be small. Small is still evidence. The birds outside your window were never proof that nothing bad can happen. They're proof that provision has a way of showing up quietly, on its own schedule, often in places you'd stopped watching. But if the evidence was there all along, and you simply stopped seeing it, a different question starts to form. What else has worry made you certain of? That was never actually true. Worry changes your relationship with control. It makes you believe you have more of it than you actually do. Here's the strange part. Nobody sits down and decides, today I will worry in order to gain control. It happens quietly, almost like a trade you never agreed to. Something feels uncertain, and worry shows up promising to manage it. Stay alert. Keep calculating. Don't relax until this is handled. So you don't relax. You run the numbers again. You reread the email twice. You lie there at midnight, doing math that was already done at 9. Here's a question worth asking honestly and maybe a little uncomfortably. All those hours spent worrying about money, did any of them actually change the outcome? Not the effort you put into working or planning or making a decision. Just the worry itself, the churning, the replaying, the bracing. Did it ever once change a single number on that screen? Jesus asked almost exactly this, in a single question that sounds gentle until you sit with it. Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Read it again. He's not asking, can worry help you plan? He's asking, can it change anything at all? And the honest answer is this. Worry itself has never changed the outcome. It has only exhausted the person carrying it. So why does it feel like it's doing something? Because worry mimics the feeling of control so convincingly that most people never stop to check if it's real. Feels productive. Feels like vigilance, like responsibility, like the opposite of carelessness. But feeling responsible and being effective are not the same thing. And the difference between them is where a great deal of exhaustion quietly lives. Think about the hours. Not metaphorically. Actually count them if you're willing. The time spent this month rechecking a balance that hadn't changed since the last check. The time spent rehearsing a conversation about money that you haven't even had yet. The time spent awake, doing arithmetic your body will pay for tomorrow in exhaustion, arithmetic your mind already finished hours ago. None of those hours bought anything. They were simply spent the way money is spent, except nobody sends a receipt. This is where the lens distorts one more time, in a way that's almost the opposite of what you'd expect. It's not that fear makes you see too little now. It's that worry convinces you it's the only thing standing between you and disaster, so letting go of it feels dangerous, even though holding on to it has never once produced a different outcome. What would it mean to admit that the worry was never actually working? Florence Scovel Shinn often wrote about the difference between faith-filled action and anxious striving, between moving with clarity and moving from fear. One directs, the other only grips. They can look almost identical from the outside, and feel entirely different from within. Maybe this is the moment to say something out loud, even just for yourself. Not because a sentence changes a bank balance, but because sometimes a new belief begins with a new declaration. If this resonates with you, write this in the comments. I adjust my focus from lack to divine provision. Not as a denial of reality, not as a way of avoiding responsibility, but as a reminder of where your attention belongs. Because here's what worry rarely lets you notice while you're inside it. Control was never actually available in the form worry promised. Real influence exists in the decisions you make, the work you do, the boundaries you set. But the churning itself, the late-night calculating, the app checked for the 4th time in an hour, was never influence. It was only the feeling of it, and feelings, however convincing, aren't the same as facts. So what happens to all those hours, once you stop spending them this way? They don't disappear. They become available again, for sleep, for presence, for the parts of life worry had quietly been taxing without ever delivering anything in return. 3 teachings in, and a pattern is starting to surface. Tomorrow put down. The belief that you're alone released. The evidence that was already there finally seen. And now, the illusion that worry was ever protecting you, exposed for what it actually was. One question remains. If worry was never the thing keeping you safe, what was? 4 teachings in, and something has been quietly happening beneath the surface. The kind of shift that's easier to feel than to explain. Go back to that banking app for a moment. Not to open it. Just to notice what's different about the thought of opening it. At the start of this video, it was described as a small ritual of bracing, hope and dread arriving at exactly the same time, before the numbers even loaded. That description hasn't changed. The app is still the same app. The balance, whatever it is tonight, is still the balance. But something underneath it has shifted, even slightly. Tomorrow was put down. The belief that you were carrying this alone was questioned. The evidence that had been there all along, quietly working, was finally allowed into view. And the illusion that worry was ever functioning as protection was named for what it actually was. 4 shifts in the way you have been seeing money, safety, and yourself built slowly, one worried evening at a time. Here's something worth noticing about how change like this actually works. It rarely arrives as a single dramatic moment. Nobody wakes up one morning completely free of financial fear because they heard the right sentence the night before. It happens the way morning fog clears, unevenly, one patch at a time, until eventually you realize you can see something you couldn't see the week before. That's likely where you are right now, somewhere in the middle of that clearing. Not finished. Not fully at peace, but different than you were 4 chapters ago, even if the difference is still hard to name. There's a question worth sitting with here before moving forward. If tomorrow isn't yours to carry, and you were never meant to carry it alone, and the evidence of provision was there before you started looking for it, and worry itself was never producing the safety it promised, then what exactly has been organizing your relationship with money all this time? Because something has. Some belief has been sitting underneath every financial decision, every anxious evening, every moment of bracing before a number loads onto a screen. And it's rarely money itself. It's whatever that belief decided money was for. For many people, without ever choosing it consciously, money quietly became the thing they believed security depended on. Not one ingredient in a secure life. The foundation of it. The thing that, if enough of it existed, would finally let the nervous system rest. But notice something. Nothing in the first 4 teachings suggested that. Jesus never said get more money and the worry will stop. He said something almost the opposite, that the worry was never really about the amount at all. It was about where the search for security had been aimed. Which leads to the last question this video needs to ask. The one the first 4 teachings were quietly building toward the entire time. If money was never meant to be the foundation, what was supposed to hold that place instead? Every question this video has asked so far has been quietly leading here, like a path that only becomes clear when you look back. If money isn't the foundation, what is? Jesus answered this directly, in the same breath as everything that came before it, as though the first 4 teachings existed only to clear enough space for this one to land. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Read quickly, it can sound like a transaction. Do this spiritual thing and the money follows. But that's not quite what's being offered here. Look at the order of the sentence again. Seek first, not seek instead of. Not ignore your finances and hope for the best. Seek first. Something has to come before something else. That's the whole structure of the sentence. And it's also, quietly, the structure of a life. For most of this video, the search for security has been aimed at a number. Enough saved, enough earned, enough left over at the end of the month. And finally the nervous system could rest. But notice something about that arrangement. The number has never actually been enough, not really, not for long. There's always a slightly higher number that would finally feel safe. And it keeps moving, just out of reach, the way a horizon does. That's not a flaw in your effort. That's what happens when something temporary is asked to do the work of something permanent. Jesus is pointing at a different kind of foundation. Not money first, peace after. Peace first, and let money find its proper place from there. This is a hard sentence to trust, especially for anyone who has genuinely struggled. Can sound like something said by someone who never had to worry about rent. But look again at who was listening that day. People with far less certainty than most of us carry now, being told the same thing. Not don't work. Not don't plan. Seek first what actually holds your life together, and let everything else find its place around that. There's an old symbol worth holding here, quieter than the ones before it. Not a lens this time, but something more like a compass. Compass doesn't tell you where you are. Tells you which way is north, no matter where you happen to be standing. Money moves. Some months it's abundant, some months it's thin. A compass built on money will spin every time the number changes. But a compass built on something steadier, something that doesn't fluctuate with a bank balance, holds its direction regardless of what the account says on any given morning. Florence Scovel Shinn wrote about something remarkably close to this. A state of inner peace and expectancy. The ability to remain grounded before outer circumstances confirm what you hope for. She believed most people get the order backward, waiting for outer circumstances to feel secure enough to finally relax, when the relaxing was always meant to come first. Not because money doesn't matter, because peace was never supposed to be money's job. This reorders something quietly important. If peace depends on the balance, you will spend your whole life negotiating with a number that never fully cooperates. But if peace comes first, from somewhere the balance can't reach, then money becomes what it was probably always meant to be. Useful, necessary, real, but not the foundation anything else stands on. Think about what changes practically in an ordinary week when this order is reversed. The bill still needs paying. The decision still needs making. Nothing about the actual math disappears. But the person making that decision is no longer making it from panic. They're making it from clarity, which tends to produce better decisions anyway. the kind panic rarely allows for. This is likely why Jesus placed this teaching last, not first. 4 teachings before it, quietly removing what was in the way. Tomorrow put down. Isolation released. Blindness to evidence lifted. The illusion of control exposed. Only then, with some of that noise cleared, does this final teaching have anywhere left to land. Seek first. Not because the rest doesn't matter, because it was never meant to come first. There's one more question worth sitting with, before this turns into something more than an idea. If peace is meant to come before the numbers instead of after them, what would it actually feel like to practice that, deliberately tonight? Before you do anything, don't try to feel different. Don't try to manufacture peace. Just notice where you are right now, in your body, in this exact moment. That's all you've been asked to do throughout this video. Not to fix everything, just to notice. 5 teachings in, something in you has likely shifted, even if it's hard to name exactly what. Tomorrow was put down. The belief that you were carrying this alone was questioned. The evidence that had been there all along was finally allowed into view. The illusion of control was named for what it was. And peace was offered a place ahead of the numbers, not behind them. Now comes the part where an idea becomes something lived, even briefly. If you're somewhere private right now, take out your phone. Find your banking app, the same one this video has returned to again and again. Don't open it yet. Just hold it for a moment. Notice what your body does at the thought of opening it. A slight tightening in the chest, maybe. Held breath. That reaction has been there for a long time, longer than you've probably noticed. You're not trying to make it disappear. You're just observing it, the way you'd observe weather passing through, without needing to control it. Now open it. Don't open it hoping the number has changed. Open it simply to notice what has changed in you. Look at the balance. Whatever it says, let it be exactly what it is, without rushing to interpret it as good news or bad news. For a few seconds, just let it be information, not a verdict on your worth, not a forecast of disaster. A number sitting on a screen the way a number sits on any piece of paper. Take a slow breath while you look at it. In and out. Notice that the number didn't get louder or quieter depending on how you breathed. Stayed exactly the same. Only your relationship to it moved. If it feels right, say something quietly, either out loud or in your mind. Not a performance. Just a small, honest sentence. The kind Jesus modeled throughout this entire teaching. Offered gently rather than forced. You might say, "Father, help me seek you before I seek certainty in numbers." Or if you'd rather keep it simple, "Today I choose to place my peace before my fear." If some anxiety rises while you sit with that sentence, let it. That's not failure. That's simply an old pattern, one that's been running for a long time, making its presence known one more time before it starts to loosen. You don't need it to disappear tonight. You only need to notice that it's there, and that it no longer has the final word. Now close the app. The number may be exactly the same. That was never the point, because tonight it no longer gets to tell you who you are. Something quiet just happened. Not loud enough to call a breakthrough. Not dramatic enough to post about. But something moved in the space between you and that number. And it's worth pausing to understand what it actually was. It wasn't the balance. The balance, whatever it said, is still exactly what it was 3 minutes ago. Nothing in the account changed. If anything needed paying before this video, it still needs paying now. So what shifted? The relationship. Not to the money itself, but to what the money had been asked to do. For a long time, without ever agreeing to it consciously, that number had been carrying a job it was never built for. It had been asked to confirm your safety, to prove your worth, to settle, once and for all, whether things were going to be all right. A single figure on a screen, holding the weight of an entire nervous system. Numbers were never meant to carry that. Neither were you. Maybe that's what peace often looks like at first. Not the absence of problems. Just the absence of panic deciding what those problems mean. Tomorrow still exists. The bills still exist. The work still exists. but they no longer get to speak first. That place now belongs to peace. Tomorrow used to stand in front of today, demanding to be solved in advance. Isolation used to whisper that no one else was watching over any of this. Evidence used to disappear into a fog of what was missing. Control used to promise safety it never once delivered. 5 teachings walked through slowly, quietly reordering what was standing where. Sometimes the deepest relief doesn't announce itself. It feels more like finally setting down something you've been holding for so long. You'd forgotten your arms were ever tired. Not a rush of joy, just a small, unmistakable lightness. The kind that's easy to miss if you're waiting for something bigger. If you notice that lightness right now, even faintly, let it be enough. It doesn't need to prove itself by fixing anything tonight. It doesn't need to be permanent to be real. You may not notice the full weight of this tonight. These things rarely announce themselves right away. More likely, you'll notice it the next time you open that app, days or weeks from now, mid-ordinary life, and realize the knot that used to form automatically simply didn't show up this time. Or it showed up smaller, quieter, easier to set back down. That's usually how this kind of change moves. Not in the moment it happens, but in the ordinary moment afterward, when an old reaction quietly fails to arrive on schedule, and you almost don't notice its absence until you stop and look for it. There will likely be harder weeks ahead. That's not pessimism. It's just what a life tends to include. Slow month, an unexpected bill, a number that dips lower than you'd like. None of what happened tonight erases that possibility. What it changes is what you bring to it when it comes. The next hard week may look remarkably similar to the last one. The same unexpected expense, the same uncertainty, perhaps even the same number on the screen. But the person looking at that number won't be the same person who began this video. This is likely closer to what Jesus meant all along when he spoke about seeking first. Not a promise that money would stop mattering, or that hard seasons would disappear on command. A promise that something steadier than money could hold the center so that whatever happened with the money, the center would still hold. Florence Scovel Shinn expressed a similar idea in her own way. Peace was never meant to wait for perfect circumstances. At the beginning of this video, opening that app felt like bracing for a verdict. Tonight, perhaps for the first time in a long while, it became something else. Just information. Nothing more. Nothing less. And once you see money through a different story, it's surprisingly difficult to go back to the old one. If something in you shifted tonight, even in a small way, that's exactly what this channel exists for. There are countless videos that promise faster wealth, bigger incomes, or secret formulas. This was never meant to be one of them. Tonight wasn't about chasing a bigger number. It was about changing the meaning that number has been carrying in your life. That's harder to find than most people expect. Most content about money either overwhelms you with numbers, or oversimplifies everything into empty positivity that doesn't survive contact with a real bill. This channel tries to do something different. Slower, more honest, one principle at a time, drawn from teachings that have outlasted centuries because they were never really about money in the first place. Tonight was Jesus and 5 things he said, quietly reordered into a path. Other evenings here look a little different. Sometimes it's a single verse, turned over slowly until something in it opens. Sometimes it's Florence Scovel Shinn, and a principle she wrote about almost a century ago that still applies to a banking app she never could have imagined. The words change. The invitation doesn't. If these 5 teachings helped you see money a little differently tonight, there are many more conversations like this waiting here. Not rushed, not built on fear, just one timeless principle at a time, until they begin to change the way ordinary life feels. Most of what gets called financial advice online is loud, urgent, built to make you feel like you're already behind. This channel starts from somewhere else entirely. Not urgency, attention. The belief that the way you see money, quietly night after night, shapes far more of your life than any single strategy ever could. If that sounds like something worth returning to, consider subscribing. Not because this channel needs the number. Because if tonight helped even a little, there's a good chance next week's video will too. And it would be a shame to lose track of where to find it. Before we leave this conversation, let's not end with another idea. Let's end with something steadier to carry into tomorrow. Thank you for staying through all of this. Not everyone does. Most people click away long before an idea has time to settle, and you didn't. That alone says something about where you are right now, and where you're willing to go. Before this ends, there's one last thing worth doing. Not another teaching to learn. Just a few seconds to close this well. If you can, close your eyes for a moment. Right where you are. Take a slow breath in. And let it out slowly too. Notice your shoulders. If they're carrying anything right now, let them set it down, even just for these few seconds. You don't have to hold it during this part. Think of tomorrow, whatever it happens to hold. A conversation you're dreading. A bill that's coming. A decision that still needs making. You don't have to solve any of it right now. You were never meant to. Let it rest in hands steadier than yours. Whisper it even just in your mind. Father, I place tomorrow in your hands. Let peace go ahead of me. Stay there for a moment longer than feels necessary. The best part of a day like this rarely announces itself. It arrives in the quiet after, in a slower breath, in a mind that isn't already 3 steps ahead, rehearsing what hasn't happened yet. Tonight, when this video ends, don't open anything else. Leave the numbers where they are. Leave tomorrow where Jesus told you to leave it. Let tonight simply be tonight. You don't have to stay awake protecting tomorrow. Whatever could be done tonight has been done. Whatever belongs to tomorrow can wait there until morning. Nothing more needs to be solved before you sleep. Wherever this finds you tonight, whatever that account happens to say, may it be allowed to simply be what it is. Number. Nothing more asked of it than that. Tomorrow will arrive in its own time. Tonight, let peace arrive first. Good night.